So yeah, we were asked to give a more informal talk today on something that was either a future research direction of our group or something that we thought exciting that was going on in the field, and I'm trying to cover all those. First of all, by being informal, I have my phthalocyanine-laden jeans on, and this is an area of research which we are devoting more and more effort in my group into, but it's also a very, very exciting new development really over the last year. I'll show you some of the great advancements in non-fullerene acceptors, and I'll thank again Trevor and Tim for giving a good introduction on a lot of the issues of small molecule organic photovoltaics. And I will point out right off the top the big difference of the molecules I'm going to talk about here. These are for solution process systems and not vacuum deposited. I'm not going to get an argument of which is better. I've worked in both camps. I think whichever one works great for an application is the one we should pursue. But what I'll talk about here today are solution process devices. So to give a really brief introduction to organic photovoltaics for people not familiar with it, so the first thing to say is organic solar cells are excitonic. That means in all materials, when we absorb a photon, we create an exciton, but the excitons in organics are very tightly bound. And that means, and they have binding energies much, much greater than the thermal energy scale of KT, so they don't spontaneously dissociate. So to get free carriers out, we have to split that exciton somehow. We do that by allowing the exciton to reach a donor-acceptor interface, where it's energetically favorable for the electron to transfer to the acceptor, and the hole to stay in the donor, and that's how we generate free charges. In order to do so, that exciton has to reach an interface before it recombines, so that puts a length scale of the domains of donor-acceptor to be something like a few tens of nanometers. So nanoscale domains are required. So, onto the acceptor side. So virtually all of the high-performance solution processed, I should say, OPV devices, and that includes both polymer and small molecule. Almost all the ones out there today use fullerene-derived acceptors, and these include things like C60, PCBM, ICBA, and there are a bunch of other variants out there. But C60 or fullerenes really, they have high electron mobility. They phase separate nicely in these devices to form those nice nanoscale domains that I was talking about, and therefore they've been widely used. But unfortunately, there's a downside to them, or a number of downsides, in fact. And they have a lot of undesirable properties, and this includes poor photochemical stability, not a great thing for a solar cell. They have a very high embodied energy. So if we're trying to make a technology which is sustainable, which we always get up here and tout them that they're going to be more environmentally friendly than silicon solar cells, well, they can't have this high embodied energy. To give you an idea, most of the estimates out there for fullerene-based acceptors is they tend to be about an order of magnitude higher embodied energy than most organic molecules. So things like 12 to 90 gigajoules per kilogram, something like that. High cost synthesis, they're very, very expensive, and also they have very poor optical absorption, not a good thing for a solar cell. So in any fullerene-containing solar cell, we're really relying on the donor to do all the optical absorption, and the fullerene is just there to get the electrons out. It would be nice to have an acceptor that also harvests some of the sunlight. So for these reasons, the development of high-performance non-fullerene acceptors has become a really hot area of research. And in late 2013, we put together a review paper on the state of the art in non-fullerene solution process acceptors. And at that time, things were maxing out at about 3% efficiency. And that paper came out at the beginning of 2014. And in the last year, that number has gone from about 3% to almost 7%, 6.8%. So huge increases in the efficiencies over the last year. As a result, we're writing a follow-up to that paper now to sort of catch up on what the state of the art is. But really exciting. So first thing let's say is this really new? And well, yes and no. And I like to point out that, okay, so this is a paper from 1986. This is really the first efficient heterojunction organic solar cell by Ching Tang at Kodak. And this used a non-fullerene acceptor, this parylene diimide material right here. It's vacuum deposited. That material is not soluble. You can't really solution process that. But the very first organic solar cells had non-fullerene acceptors. The fullerene acceptors came along later. So these parallel diamides have been widely used in vacuum deposited devices, but of course they have to be modified to use them solution process, and that's usually done by sticking alkyl chains on them, functionalizing them in different ways to get some solubility. But even just a straight alkyl chain substituted PDIs are only slightly soluble. You can make OTFTs out of them, but it's hard to get enough material to make a good solar cell. But in the last year, there have been a number of new developments to improve these. So, for instance, the incorporation of these branched alkyl chains on the end. So, if you think about these things in 3 dimensions, they rotate around and so forth. This inhibits the molecular stacking, and it reduces the aggregation. And something I forgot to mention up here that I'll come back to is one of the big problems that we find with these non-fullerene acceptors is they tend to overcrystallize. So we get phase separation, they phase separate too well. We get crystallites that are microns in size instead of tens of nanometers, and they don't work well in solar cells. So this actually ends up being the main thing that we fight in these non-fullerene acceptors, is trying to reduce the domain size, try to get them to not like to crystallize quite so much. So a lot of what we'll see in the next slides are ways that people have looked at breaking up the crystallinity to get that domain size under control. So there have been a lot of people looking at PDI, or parallel diamide, dimers and oligomers, and all sorts of interesting things, tethering them together with carbon-carbon bonds, fusing them together, putting different bridging groups in between. And all of these, you can imagine that they become 3-dimensional and twisted type molecules such that they can't pack well and you're breaking up the crystallinity. And these have achieved then much higher efficiencies, getting up into the 5s, even up into 6.1 here and so forth. But we're really excited in my group and with our collaborators, Greg Welch's group, particularly in chemistry at Dow, soon to be Calgary, on the non-PDI acceptors, and this is really the space that we work in. And here we're looking at more molecules that are made from simple building blocks. So the idea here is you'll see a lot of common building blocks between all these different molecules. So we see a lot of diketoprolol type things, thiodiazole. So please excuse me, I am a physicist, not a chemist, so the fact that I can even say these words to me is quite impressive. Different end-capping units, rhodamine here, but you'll see these things pop up all together or very, very often, and it's different ways of putting these things together that we can tailor their both the electronic energy levels to make them favorable for electron transfer, but also their optical properties. And by controlling the positioning of these these alkyl chains, you'll see these branched alkyl chains all over the place, and terminal alkyl chains to control the solubility and also the self-assembly or the crystallization into the thin films. And by modifying these things, and this is where we really get, this is not our work, but in the same space that we work in, people are now reaching about 6.8% power conversion efficiency. So to me, this is remarkable. This increase has come in the last year. And so the common themes, the takeaway messages that we have here. So we always have these strong electron withdrawing functionalities to increase the accepting nature of the molecules. These bulky substituents on the molecules to inhibit the propensity for aggregation formation, so we get smaller domain sizes. And these aliphatic side chains, often branch chains to promote the material solubility and also influence the morphology of the thin films. So takeaway messages, there's been huge progress made in this field. The efficiencies still aren't quite as high as the fullerene-based devices, but they're getting pretty close. And why should you be excited? Because I hope I've convinced you that fullerenes are perhaps one of the weakest links in current OPV devices, and that for OPV to succeed, these devices must be extremely inexpensive, efficient, and also sustainable. And I believe that this work in the non-fullerene acceptors is leading us in the right direction to get to those goals. And I will leave it there.
Questions?
Is there any findings about the stability of them that you mentioned it?
That's an excellent question, and at this point, no, not really. At this point, people are really just trying to see what works. And I mean, in my group, we are starting to worry about stability, but it's not an active area yet. It's still, like I said, this is all within the last year, but it's definitely something that has to be looked at. And my guess is, I mean, a lot of these similar molecules, and especially on the PDI side, have been used in things like N-channel organic thin film transistors for years. And the regular PDIs were not air stable, but people very quickly figured out that putting strong electron withdrawing groups on them to push the LUMO level down to make it more stable against oxidation, then suddenly you had air stable material. So I think it'll follow something similar to that.
Other questions? I have one. Do they work as the same like bulk junction scheme that fullerene works, like separations?
Absolutely, absolutely. But trying to control that morphology is much, much more difficult.
Okay.
Fullerenes just seem to work nicely.
Right.
So we have to work a lot harder to get the morphology right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So if there's no more questions, this finished the afternoon session, and there's refreshment until the next session, which will start in 20 after 3. Thank you.